Hello, good morning, everyone. It's really great to see so many familiar faces in the audience. My name is Alvar Escriva-Bou. I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering and the Institute of Environment and Sustainability at UCLA. But maybe more importantly today, I was for 8 years working at PPIC. Have been working in valley issues for maybe 7 years now. And so I'm really honored to have been working with many of you here and with the PPIC team on all these really important issues. So with that, I'll pass to start the panel. We're going to talk about managing water in the SGMA era. So we're talking about land transitions today and land repurposing, but we all know that all this starts with SGMA, with the passage of SGMA in 2014. So for today's panel, I want to deal with 3 main issues. First is basically how is the SGMA process going? We have been 3 years for many basins in the valley into the implementation area. Some things are working, some things are working not so well. So we want to learn more from our panelists about that. Second, it's that we all know, that land transitions, land following is one likely outcome of the valley, but most of the residents, most of the researchers, we want to avoid as much fallowing as we can. So for that, we need to bring new supplies to the valley. That's the last resort, the land following issue. So we would like to talk also about groundwater recharge. This is one of the biggest hopes in the valley. And we just had a really wet year, so we have some good insights in the panel. And third, as Andrew was mentioning, water trading generally is one of the things that actually can make the transition easier or also less costly for the valley. So we want to also ask our panelists how is trading being implemented and how are they seeing these issues. So with that, I'll present the panelists. So we have, starting from far left, we have Kassy Chauhan. She's the executive officer at the North Kings Groundwater Sustainability Agency. She also wears other hats, but you can go to the PPIC website to see all her CV. We have next Sonia Sanchez. She's a senior community development specialist at Self-Help Enterprises. Then we have John Cameron, vice president and general manager of Terranova Ranch. And here to my left, we have Aaron Fukuda, the general manager of the Tulare Irrigation District. So first, thanks so much for agreeing to participate in this panel. And we'll start with the questions. I would like to start, as I said, on how is SGMA going. So I'll start with Kassy. I mentioned that you are the executive officer of North Kings GSA, one of the GSAs that included in the Greater Kings Basin that got the conditional pass from the DWR. So what are the things that work well and what are the challenges ahead? And generally, how is the SGMA process going?
Yeah, thank you, Alvaro. I am excited to be here. Thank you, PPIC, for the work and the invitation to present today. We'll start with the good news. And the good news is we got the passing grade by DWR on our plan. And to Ashley's point earlier, one of the main things is to have a very good plan. And so that is cause for celebration. And I try not to lose sight of that, despite the fact that many of my colleagues, many of them sitting in the room, did not have that same outcome, but it'll get better. It'll get better. Stay the course. So the Kings was very excited to receive that designation. We have a very good plan, and we are afforded the opportunity to continue with implementation of that plan. That's great news, but the celebration didn't last too long because the 60-page document that told us we were approved also has some very specific corrective actions. And so the work is in some ways just begun, but we are able to continue with implementation of that plan. It's one of the key things for the Kings, I think, in receiving that designation was the fact that we remained very, very coordinated in our effort. We have an excellent point of contact for our basin, and he's done an excellent job at reminding us, you have to stay together. You have to stay together. And that's critical because, as we know, as things get tough, it's very easy to start to fragment off. So I would say one of the things that's going very well is we have the plan. We have, everyone is still part of the basin. Everyone is still fairly coordinated in that effort. And we're having really great coordination amongst the GSAs and their member agencies and amongst the GSAs. It's encouraging. And it's exciting to see that level of coordination happening and the strategy that's now going into developing projects so that you're receiving these multiple benefits that we've talked about and being able to have those conversations openly because we have the right people in the room. Another one of Ashley's great points, getting the right people in the room to have those conversations. So I would say those are some of the things that are going really, really well. We've done a lot of projects in the Kings Basin. In 2020, we had about 600 acres that were either developed and or in the process of being developed for future recharge basins, which paid dividends in a year like this because we have this historic water year and we're able to put more than 450,000 acre feet of water into the underground using this year's floodwaters and water supply. That's phenomenal. That's reason to be excited. Now the challenges are continuing to be coordinated, continuing to be able to stay in the same room, and the fact that we're not in a bubble. It would be much easier if we were in a bubble and we could just go about implementing our plan and not have to worry about the impacts from neighbors and or GSAs or basins, but that's not the reality. So the conversations are going to continue to be difficult, but we are going to the degree possible, stay coordinated. Another real important challenge is some of those corrective actions that were required as a condition of our approval from DWR. We have some major studies to do, we have some major programs to implement, and they all cost money. So we have to not be afraid of the price tag. I'm using all of Ashley's points, but it's critical because a lot of GSAs aren't set up to generate revenue, and we have challenges with generating revenue. So we rely heavily on state dollars, and the state's been great, but those pots of money have started to dry up. So that's a challenge as well, is continuing to have dollars available both at the local, federal, and state levels so that we can continue implementing those plans and doing those projects.
Thanks so much, Kassy. So Aaron, I don't want to put you on the spot, but even with all the efforts that you have done, and many of us are in the room and in the valley are recognizing. So you're on the other side. The Cahuilla Basin plans have been deemed inadequate by DWR. So we wanted to ask, and again in a positive tone, how are you working to solve that, and what does the future look like?
Well, let me start out with our therapist is telling we're dealing much better with our inadequacy right now. My wife loves that I've been deemed inadequate. Let me go back to when we got the notice, and so growers immediately when we got it came in, and I went out to them and said, hey, listen, breaking the news. I suspected that traditionally I'd get quite a bit of anger and resentment towards the money, the time, and the effort that we had spent. And the emotion I got out of them was disappointment. And so that's an odd emotion to see in the face of all of the work that we had done, but it showed me that they're committed to the process. So we took that energy and turned it into, okay, what are we going to do to keep this program going? It should be further noted that it's kind of complicated in what the inadequate is versus, and many people ask me this question, Aaron, how did, not specifically me, but your district end up in an inadequate when you're on all these panels being asked to talk about all the things you're doing? It is ironic. However, the process is really complicated. SGMA evaluated plans separately from implementation and sustainability, really. So the task of DWR was to identify in your planning document, did you follow the steps properly? And they identified some things that we didn't do right. So now we're committed to fixing those items now that we're in front of the State Water Resources Control Board. They've flagged really 2 significant items for us. We've committed 2 core teams, is what we call them, that are doing the technical work to address those issues. We're bringing that data back, and we're spending very careful time with our advisory committees and the public to explain the process. Because you have to remember, the decisions you make in your plan determine the outcome of your economic and social fabric of your communities. And for all practical purposes, our communities are agriculture. So if we dial back agriculture, we dial back the things that we see around us. We dial back the amount of money you have to go eat dinner out. You dial back the discretionary dollars to your fundraising and your Little League team. So we're being very careful about how we do that, because ultimately, the minimum thresholds, those levels that you can't go to, are coming up. So if they come up too high, that's just as much of a failure if you make them too low. So we're being very careful about that. That being said, we are now transitioned away from the Department of Water Resources. We're always talking with the Department of Water Resources, but we're now in front of the State Water Resources Control Board and their staff, and we're working with them to address those concerns and maybe any others they may have. So it's a different process. If we fail, to return that plan back to them, ultimately the probationary hearing and the interim plan would be put in place. And that to us is the last step of SGMA. There's nothing beyond that in the documents that say, oh, if you fail at that, then there's something else. So we know that that is the end of the road for our local control, and the state then steps in and says, here's how you're going to get to sustainability. And the state doesn't have the funds or the time to build you projects or bring you water. So ultimately, that becomes a demand management question. And that would be disastrous for us in our local community. So we're working hard to address those concerns, stay out of probation, keep a positive outlook, and then ultimately, like I indicated, the implementation side is a totally different, and Kassy's, we can both agree, that is a different perspective, and we have committed to the implementation, right? So if you, our consultant, it dawned on her earlier this year, she said, in all the conversations that everybody's having across the state, there's not one program that you're not touching and or leading the way on. And that was because our growers said, hey, you better lean into this. So we leaned into it back prior to 2020. We were making investments in technology to image our earth, to make the better decisions. We were leaning into our disadvantaged communities to work with them to solve their problems. And then we are looking at the trading. That trading thing is a very, very interesting, fun, controversial. It's got everything balled up into one. And so for instance, you have to be careful. Once you make a trade, money trades hand for a resource. And if you get it wrong, how do you undo that? Our committees are looking at that. So we don't want to make wrong trades, put it that way. So we're keeping it positive and keeping our implementation out there and moving forward, and then working on our plan corrections. That's how we're looking at the inadequate and moving forward.
Thanks so much, Aaron. So let's go with Sonia now. Many voices from the EG groups that you represent have highlighted the lack of representation of small communities in the SGMA process and deficiencies in the plans to address negative impacts to these communities. And actually, DWR has pointed out to these deficiencies in their determinations. So how are things going in these fronts? Are GSAs being more responsive to all these issues? And what are the strategies that are working well to account for community views?
Sure. It varies. So I'm going to talk very broadly about what we're seeing versus like specifics, because it does vary. But some themes that we're seeing are that communities are not being engaged overall. I think one of the opportunities that we see is having more than one seat on the board, on the deciding in a place where decisions are made, that community members can get involved. Many of the GSAs do not have rural board members on their board, but that is an opportunity. It's not a requirement of SGMA, but we definitely see that that could be a space where residents could be more involved and have their voices heard. There are some GSAs that do have advisory committees for the rural communities, but at the end of the day, decisions are made at the board meeting levels and at the board level. So those are some opportunities that we see. Another thing I wanted just to point out is that, prior to SGMA, we did see that there was record ag revenue here in the San Joaquin Valley, while we had over 2,000 wells go dry. So that was one of the catalysts for why SGMA was implemented. We are cognizant that all wells cannot be protected under SGMA. I think that's an unrealistic expectation, but that the majority of wells do need to be protective, and minimum thresholds do need to be set at levels that protect domestic wells. One of the things that I think there is another opportunity for is the mitigation of wells. Our organization, Self-Help Enterprises, Leadership Council, and Community Water Center developed a framework to help GSAs develop their own mitigation framework. We didn't see that tool being utilized. I think had more GSAs utilized that tool and incorporated a more robust plan program in their plans, I think maybe we would have saw more GSAs pass. So those are some of the things that we're seeing lacking in the GSAs and areas of opportunities that we see for community members to, one, get involved, and for communities and domestic wells being protected.
Thanks so much, Sonia. And Don, we'll go with you now. So I wanted to ask you kind of a broader question, and it's because you have been farming for many years in the Valley, and I wanted to, hear from you if you could give us a little bit of historical perspective on groundwater issues. Are you optimistic on ending groundwater overdraft in the Valley?
Thank you, Alvar. It's really a pleasure to be here today. We've been involved in water and groundwater recharge for quite some time. But, the historical side of, I think, a grower's previous expectations were, if they owned the land, they felt that they owned the water below the land, just as they would mineral rights. They felt that was, when they bought a piece of ground, they felt they owned the water below it. And, when SGMA was implemented, that was a game changer. And we're seeing now a real swing in perception and understanding with growers throughout the Valley, now that we've implemented GS Groundwater Sustainability Agencies, a whole new layer of regulation for growers and communities throughout the state. The critically overdrafted basins had their plans in early. And I just think that it's been a real learning process, historically, a real mind changer from what growers were used to doing in the past to where they are today. We found that growers have been very supportive in our Groundwater Sustainability Agency. When we first implemented a fee, it was a $19 per acre fee that they had never really associated with the taking of and use of groundwater. And during our meetings, we had growers that wanted us to charge $100 per acre to support solutions for continued farming within our Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So there's been a real shift in attitude and responsibility, and I think that we do have a future in California, even in some of our basins that are critically overdrafted. We're going to find solutions. The state was good because they made local control. And our groundwater sustainability agencies have local control. Local growers, local communities are all part of the solution. A little quick story: we had a meeting early on in SGMA in an area, and it was myself and another director, and we thought we were going to be run out of the meeting. It started getting out of hand pretty quickly, that we were going to be forcing them and their families out of farming, and there really wouldn't be a history. We explained, look, we're growers too. We all want the same thing. We want to continue to be sustainable. We want to continue to farm. And we had one grower get up and said, look, if we don't do this now, the same thing's going to happen. It's just going to take longer. So we need to support this. When we left, we got a round of applause. So totally 180.
Yes. Sorry, thanks so much, Don. And it was a really great story to end that part. So I wanted to pass to this second thread of the morning on, we had a really wet year. We are all hoping to get more water supplies, and one of the best hopes, as I said in the beginning, it's to recharge groundwater. Don is one of the innovators in the Valley, and I wanted to start with you again, but I wanted to also bring up that one of the main policy triggers this year was the executive order that made it easier to capture flood waters for groundwater recharge. So as an innovator on farm groundwater recharge, so could you tell us a little bit about how things went this year, and what would you tell other farmers about your experience?
We had a really I think it was really a surprise when we were anticipating another dry year for 2023. The rains began, and the rains didn't stop. We ended up with record snowpack, and we ended up having floodwater, which was unprecedented, coming off a 3-year drought that we did. We had infrastructure that we had put together and finished building. It was over 2.5 years ago, but it never had water in it. We knew that the water was going to be coming. We went out and secured pumps and paid rent on them in anticipation of floodwater coming. We did that because we knew that the supply was going to get extremely tight, it was going to be hard to get, and we wanted to be ready to go. The executive order was a real game changer. It essentially relieved growers and other agencies of going through the permit process, the floodwater permitting process with the State Water Board, which is a very cumbersome and expensive process. So we were glad to see that happen. It opened the door. But I think a lot of other growers and different agencies were caught off guard, pretty much as we were. But what we found is when the water did come, first, we have a large 450 horsepower pump that hadn't been turned on. It had been in place for 2.5 years. So we went to do a test on it. It didn't start. And I'll tell you what, you go from a lot of anticipation to a lot of worry, because these pumps don't come off the shelf. It took over a year to build and get in place. We had to have somebody come out, reprogram, add some other wires. Lo and behold, 2 weeks later, we pushed the button and it came on, and all of a sudden it went from not having any water to having a tremendous amount of water. It pumped 77,000 gallons a minute, which is a lot of water. So we started filling our canals, filling our fields that have berms on them, and we tended to overdo it a little bit. And what we found was we had 2 levees break, go back into our canal. We had water heading toward a state highway. We cut our canal, dumped a lot of water in 300 acres of pistachios. The water was 4 feet deep on the deep end. We ended up killing about 50 to 100 trees in the process, which they were young trees. They've already been replaced. But we found that gophers will definitely turn into a problem. And I guarantee you, the levees only break in the middle of the night. I tell you, 2 a.m. twice. And the good thing is when they finished building our canals and our project, we hired the guy that built them. So within 2 weeks, we had the levees rebuilt. We were back in operation, but it's expensive. It took a lot of money to bring that water on farm, get it spread, but in the long run, it was well worth it. So,
Do you have an estimate of how much water you put this year?
so we're crunching the final numbers. Our numbers from that we used were over 18,000 acre feet of water. But we're somewhere between 16 and 18, almost 19,000 acre feet of water that we took and put on the land and put into the ground. And we have monitoring devices in old wells. And typically what you see, your normal curve is you have your high level in April, your lowest level of your groundwater will be in July and August, and then you'll see recovery during the winter. What we saw was essentially a straight line. I anticipated it going higher, but it was actually a straight line across. And just looking at it lately, we're actually seeing it increase even more and exceed the April levels that we had earlier this year. So I think we're going to continue to see improvements in our water table throughout the next 6 months.
Great, thank you, Don. And Aaron, in conversations that we had in preparing this panel, you mentioned that you didn't need the executive order because you were already set up with the necessary water rights. But you've also been doing some innovative things on recharge this year. So what could make easier to recharge more water, and what incentives are you giving to farmers?
I'll give this one a shot. So let me start with the incentive piece first, a little backwards, so I can explain what happened in our district. I'm going to go back to 2021. Landowners in our district approached our GSA and our irrigation district, recognizing watching in the throes of a drought, the levels were declining. Basically, they acknowledged that the sustainability of the groundwater levels was the sustainability of their wells. And if they saw this chasing the bottom scenario and said, can we put something together that would allocate and necessarily cap our groundwater pumping so that we didn't have to keep replacing wells every 5 to 10 years. Traditionally in our area, a generational well should last you 20 to 30 years. And these wells were estimated to only last 5 to 10. So if you've got $250,000 to $500,000 to $750,000 investment in a well, are you just farming for wells and chasing everybody down to the bottom? This is a grower-driven conversation. So just like Don's, the conversations are amongst the growers. It's not being driven by other folks. What we put together was an emergency ordinance that allocated groundwater measured as evapotranspiration. We allocated out 2.5 acre feet per acre maximum usage. That 2.5 acre feet per acre, if you look at our cropping patterns, the average we use is over 3 acre feet per acre. So we set the gauntlet down with our growers and said, we're going to give you less and you need to figure it out. So put your mind in that concept about, okay, now everybody went into panic mode. Nobody was happy. Just like Don said, the first meeting I had, I barely made it out of that room. And then spent the next 6 months on my phone every day trying to straighten out why we're doing this. And I tell everybody it's a 2-hour conversation. The first hour they're yelling at you, and the second hour they're going, okay, we're going to do it. How can I be a part of it? And once we got it in place, everybody recognized it was worth it. So again, just like Don said, we're sitting in November, December. I'm going to conferences talking about how this emergency ordinance is great and it's working and we're ready for drought. And then the switch flipped, and I'm back at my office, like Don, worrying about levees breaking at 2 o'clock in the morning, or more so, we had a risk in the Kauai system where we were going to overtop the dam at 4 o'clock in the morning. And what does that mean? Flooding in Visalia and all these other issues. In that melee, our staff wasn't even paying attention. We had established a water dashboard where growers, surface water and groundwater is loaded into the water dashboard and balanced against evapotranspiration. Well, what we didn't even pay attention to is the growers understood it better than we could even understand it. If they over-applied in their fields, it showed up as a credit in their water dashboard. The minute we opened up we needed growers to take water in January. We had 120 some odd orders come in the dead of winter, and it's raining. Typically at that time of year, we'd only get like 6 people, and we'd have to go beg people to take water. And we figured it out that that same tool that was a detriment became an incentive. So now that water dashboard was accruing credits to growers. So early estimates are growers probably diverted upwards of 130,000 acre feet to the turnouts. Now, some of that's going to go to evapotranspiration. I would say between 30 and 50% of that ended up in the groundwater system. And then the irrigation district itself has its own fleet of recharge basins, canals, projects. And to date, we have about 150,000 acre feet put into the ground. Our groundwater levels have responded tremendously. We went out and took some measurements, and we've got some pressure transducers in wells, and we're seeing about 20 to 30 feet of elevation change positive. So things are moving in the right direction. So those incentive tools we built, they look like they were going to be disincentive tools, but embedded in them were their own incentives. What could we use to help that recharge scenario? And it's going to be a little odd. We need surface water storage. And I know that's not necessarily popular across the state, but from a water manager's perspective, if you're really serious about climate change, you're going to add surface water storage to your portfolio. Because when that water comes off at that rate that we have to deal with, there's nowhere to put it. So you're either going to flood or store it. And you can't, the ground can only absorb it at so much of a rate. So, anecdotally, our growers were laughing because they said, everybody around us was worried about flooding, and we saw, people out there cutting banks to try and move water around. Our growers said, bring it on. So we didn't flood, we recharged. One of the funniest stories was one of our growers was really frustrated because his neighbors weren't taking any water during this period. And that neighbor called me one day and said, why is my neighbor taking water? And I said, well, he's getting credit on his water dashboard. He goes, are you serious? I didn't even realize that. He called that afternoon, placed an order. Well, this grower is the one that called in is our largest grower in our irrigation district. And when he irrigates with massive pumps like Don has. And when he fires up, our canal levels drop because he can move so much water. He fired up and filled up his entire ranch to the point where he had water going on the roads. He had water everywhere. The other neighbors called me. They were just laughing. They were like, what did you tell him? I said, I didn't tell him anything. And that was the spirit that was going around. It just felt good. Everybody was part of the program. Everybody was doing it. Everybody was contributing. It's showing up on their water dashboard, and groundwater levels are moving in the right direction. Had we had more surface water storage, what that does for us, it slows it down. We reduce that flooding. And then the best recharge, hands down, numbers, everything, is not groundwater, putting the molecule in the ground. It's not pulling it out at all. It's called in lieu groundwater recharge. So with a surface water storage project, you can provide that to agriculture, who has its own return flows. So it's a double whammy for you. You get way more benefits from in lieu recharge than groundwater recharge. Surface water storage provides that to you. Our district has found ways to do it without talking about large statewide storage. We're reclaiming old mining operations and turning them into surface water storage projects with habitat portfolios along the edges and things like that. So there's ways to do it, but we really need everybody to understand surface water storage has to be a part of your portfolio.
Great. Thanks so much for the stories, Aaron. Kassy, both Don and Aaron were mentioning flood risks during these times, this last year. So I would like to, you've been working actually with the flood control districts. I think that it's a really interesting and innovative program, like trying to put together recharge issues and flood management, flood risk management. So could you tell us a little bit about this case and how the coordination between, GSAs and flood districts are happening?
Yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit about that. So the Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control District is the local flood control district. And in a year like this, in a post-SGMA world, you're really looking for any opportunity to put water back into the underground. And so we have existing partnerships with Fresno Irrigation District, Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control District, and the local cities in the area to not only use our dedicated recharge basins, which Fresno Irrigation District has about 900 acres across our boundary, and then we have plans to add another 400, which is great. But then you exponentially increase the amount of locations where you can put water if you incorporate the storm drain basins as well. So they come with restrictions, obviously, because you can't be recharging during the peak of the flood. But once those basins are decommissioned and they're no longer needed for flood routing, you can then utilize those to put additional water into the underground and use them for recharge purposes. So we have that program in place. It's been long established, and it increases our total number of basins by about 1,300 acres. And so utilizing the existing infrastructure that we have, we can take the water in, pull it into the district, pull it out into our recharge basins, and then additionally put it into the flood control basins. So that's an opportunity that we've been practicing for a long period of time. And like I said, it does come with restrictions, but it's great to have those additional spots where you can put water. Another thing that we're working on is identifying additional locations. So those basins that I'm referencing right now are all intertied already. The flood control uses FID's infrastructure to get water out, to route it out of the metropolitan area so that we can reduce flooding during the flood season. And then we allow the water to sit in the basins during the summer months, essentially, so that we can recharge. But there are other basins that the flood control district has purchased outside of its existing or the existing service areas for the cities for future growth. So they secure that land and they will be future basins. Some of them are already developed, but they're not interconnected with any of FID's infrastructure because we're not quite there yet. And so through that process and this year's emergency declaration, there were some emergency dollars available from the Department of Water Resources where we were able to put temporary interties in so that we could get some benefit from those additional basins. DWR was phenomenal in working with Adam Clays. He's our Assistant General Manager of Fresno Irrigation District, and he and the Department of Water Resources worked very closely to secure the pumps, get the infrastructure in place, come up with a trash rack to keep the water, the trash from entering the pumps. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek because there was some innovation involved with creating a emergency trash rack. But anyway, they were able to implement those projects in a very short amount of time. And that's maybe one of the benefits of emergency declarations and emergency funding, is you can really do a lot in a short period of time and be able to not lose the opportunity to use that infrastructure for recharge. Another thing that we're working on that involves that same coordination is with the Fresno Stream Group. So we have a Fresno County Stream Group. It includes City of Fresno, City of Clovis, Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control District, Fresno County, and Fresno Irrigation District. That's, again, a very long-established organization. But we have Big Dry Creek Reservoir. It's right up here in northeast Fresno, 30,000-acre reservoir. And to Aaron's point, we're looking at not traditional above-ground storage, statewide above-ground storage, but any opportunity that exists, particularly with existing facilities, to be able to capture more water, store the water, and then be able to put it to beneficial use and bring it into the region. So we're looking at and working with Army Corps along with our Fresno County Stream Group partners to reoperate a reservoir. It's complicated, it costs a lot of money, but those are opportunities that we feel are imperative if we're going to continue to try to capture as much water, so we're really limiting how much water how much land we have to take out of production and how much demand we have to reduce. So any of those opportunities are going to continue to involve a lot of coordination, and luckily we have those existing partnerships already in place, so the conversations are easier to have, and we're able to move those projects forward and take advantage of those opportunities when they come up.
Great, thanks so much. So I was thinking, like, one thing is like the preparation in advance, like having these partnerships in place when you have, planning for droughts, planning for floods, for floods. So that's really great. And Sonia, we are all for recharge, I think, in the Valley, But it's true also that recharge, there are concerns about water contamination, especially when we do recharge close to communities. Is this issue being addressed properly, or how can we ensure that water will be safe to drink while keep increasing recharge?
Yeah, I think recharge is very important for SGMA implementation and reaching sustainability. There's lots of benefits with recharge, also with flood control, as we've heard from Kassy here. And we're going to be continuing to see this whiplash of weather, from extreme drought to extreme wet years, as we've seen this last year. But, as we look at recharge projects, I think a really important piece is looking at impacts for communities where we have recharge projects that are very close to nearby communities. We want to make sure, and it's also mandated by SGMA, that undesirable results like water quality not be more impacted by projects and management action. So as we are looking at these recharge projects, having monitors near the recharge projects to monitor to see if they're increasing contamination around communities is going to be very important. We don't want to create a more worse situation. We already have communities dealing with not having water, and those communities that do have water are mostly impacted by contaminated water. So we definitely don't want to make the situation worse. I think a really great example that I can give is in Aaron's GSA, the Mid-Korea GSA, where Self-Help Enterprises has partnered with the GSA for the Okieville Recharge Project. So there's a recharge project that went in that's right near the community of Okieville. It's a small community, and it's providing benefits. And I think at the end of the day, having projects that do have multi-benefits and benefits for communities is going to be very important. And that's one of the primary goals of the multi-benefit land repurposing program that we'll hear more about here later. But having benefits for communities is going to be important. So again, having these monitors around recharge projects that are near communities will be very important to make sure that our communities are not further impacted by these types of projects.
Thanks.
Alvar, I was going to add one thing. As Sonia was talking, I was thinking about it, and something that Don said earlier. One of the challenges that we encountered that I think is a real challenge, despite having people wanting to raise their hand and say, yes, I want to do my part. I want to do my part on a local level on my farm, is when you get the question, what do you want me to do? And behavior change is hard enough, but then one time you're telling them, convert to drip. Everybody needs to do drip because we need to conserve as much water as possible. And then in the next breath, you're saying, oh, can you please take flood water? We need you to flood your farms because we need to have that recharge benefit. So getting positioned so that you can deal with those conflicting messages and have that operational flexibility depending on the conditions and the whiplash and the weather that we're experiencing is going to be critical in my mind. And having resources available to facilitate having both types of irrigation is going to be really critical moving forward, so that those people who do want to do their part have an opportunity to do that, and we have means to facilitate that conflicting message depending on what the weather conditions are.
Thanks so much, Kassy. I think it's really interesting that this point on there's many nuances on many different issues, and there's a need to address depending on the goal that you are looking for, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to go. We're getting closer to the last part of the Q&A. So I want to go to wire trading too. As you saw from Andrew's presentation, we assess that that's one of the best options that we have to reduce the cost of achieving sustainability in the valley. So Aaron, you're in a region with significant water cuts, and we're trading, groundwater trading especially could be beneficial, but at the same time you have significant potential impacts, given subsidence and effect on drinking water wells. So how is the process to incentivize groundwater trading going, and which safeguards are you considering?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You think, and the model that's going in SGMA has been used throughout the nation, the world. It's a cap and trade system, right? And then in our sub-basin, what we accidentally did is we set the cap, forgot the trade. And so you can imagine the growers are like, wait, you capped us and now we can't trade? We got to figure this out. So we did receive a Bureau Reclamation grant. We're very thankful to the Bureau in supporting this activity and knowing the importance of it. It unfortunately started right in the midst of COVID, and the most important part in our mind was to establish a committee to oversee the development of that strategy. And the face time was the most critical part. So we kind of got delayed. So we're just now getting to the final document. But critical to that was establishing a water marketing strategy committee with representatives from all the beneficial users and geographic representation of our sub-basin, so that the rules and the guidance on the trading was developed by all the interests at the table. And we started out with establishing guiding principles, so that I think there's 5 guiding principles. So every decision made by the committee has to meet all 5 guiding principles. If it doesn't meet one, the decision can't move forward. Interestingly enough, that guiding principles took several months to develop, and it was one of our first meetings in person. I couldn't have it in the office. I had to have it in the shop with 6 feet of separation, and it was right at the beginning of summer. So you can imagine 11 people in a hot building. It got pretty darn intense, and we couldn't agree on the 5 principles because just to be honest about it, ag wanted flexibility, but you can't just move water everywhere you want. And so then you had to counterbalance that. And we got 2 hours into the session, and we weren't going anywhere. We were going backwards at that point. So interestingly enough, I told everybody, let's take a break. It's hot in here. Everybody go, just take a quick break. For some reason, I had a box of See's chocolate or something. I broke that out. We came back, and one of the members said, hey, Aaron, I don't think we're going anywhere. We probably ought to just call this meeting over. And I said, no, you guys are staying here until we get to the guiding principles. An hour later, we had unanimous decision. We had 5 guiding principles. And those 5 guiding principles really have every single decision we've made. So to protect the concerns that are out there from disadvantaged communities, the environmental community, from the disadvantaged community perspective, what we've said is, listen, there's going to be triggers. And as the water level drops, if we get too close to a minimum threshold or dry wells, trading has to stop, meaning you can't trade pumping into that zone. You can only trade out. So then that landowner has an economic benefit. He can still move a molecule of water out in fallow ground, so that's a win-win. Now, actually, what we're looking at, that provides the protection to the disadvantaged community that wasn't necessarily always there. So we'll create this buffer around there. From the environmental community, our local Sequoia Riverlands Trust is one of our best management tools when it comes to open space. That open space is usually along our rivers. And so now they can offload that water into their properties, recharge it, and then share it with their neighbors. And from an economic perspective, now they have a revenue stream to go develop more projects in our multi-benefit land repurposing program. So the market opens up these windows. But the committee was very aware that if you move too fast, how do you undo an exchange? You go to court, and we don't want to do that. So their initial recommendation is only open up the markets within an individual GSA. It's interesting that, the PPIC report says it's got different modes of local and then broaden out, and we're going to start small and grow, and you're only allowed to trade 10 inches of water at any given point in time across your properties. So 10 inches per acre. That should limit the amount of potential harm that can happen, because our allocations are anywhere between 1.5 and 2.5 acre feet per acre. So you can only move in every year 10 inches of water to somebody else. We've developed in our water dashboard a automated system. It will identify how much water you have available to trade. You can post it as a sale, and a buyer can post a buy, and it matches the buyers and the sellers. And it happens automatically. If you don't want to go through the automated system, you submit a buy-sell ticket, and we evaluate that buy-sell ticket of sorts, check it to make sure there's no harm potentially, and then it's approved, and it moves on the water dashboard. So we're trying to create something that's seamless with the protections, and the involvement, and our committee is going to stay together into the implementation window so they can oversee and annually evaluate the concerns.
Thanks, Don. Sorry, Aaron. Aaron, you were talking about groundwater trading. I want to talk with Don now because you farm in the McMullen area, an area that it's what is usually called a white area, a region or a district with no surface supplies. So while in many places groundwater trading can bring benefits in your area, you are in need to bring surface supplies from other places. And this is kind of the modeling scenarios that we've been looking. It's, there's groundwater trading, but there's also surface trading where you can bring from other places. Especially in white areas, it's really important to bring surface area from other regions. Are you getting surface supplies, and how are you doing that?
So our GSA is 100% groundwater pumped, and we do have about half of the area as a white area, which has no representation from a water district. We're actually in the process of annexing the white area into one of the districts within the GSA. So our GSA will, if we're successful in doing this, will not have white area, but we still don't have the water source. We're currently developing a groundwater banking plan and infrastructure so that we can bring other people's water on board, bring it into our GSA. There's a leave behind with trades. So we think that will help supplement the region. We're also, we're looking at floodwater down the road. We're before the State Water Board currently, waiting for a decision there on whether that's going to progress. So we're looking at other options to bring water in. And really, I truly believe that within the King Subbasin, we're starting to see better cooperation between GSAs. And I think there's a lot of potential to be moving water within the subbasin from other GSAs when there is water available. Nobody's asking for it for free, but we know that, look, if the entire subbasin isn't successful, if one area is not successful, the whole region is in trouble. So I think cooperation is becoming very apparent, and we're looking forward to working with the other GSAs as well.
So just a curiosity, the groundwater bank that you're working on, are you also building new infrastructure, surface infrastructure, or you already have the infrastructure?
So infrastructure in the groundwater pumped areas there had been none because there hadn't been any water. We're looking at the expansion of our project, another 13 miles of canals to bring water to the east and bringing floodwater to areas that are really advantageous for groundwater recharge. So we're looking at all options. When you've got farmers involved that have their livelihood at stake, they get pretty creative. So I think we do have a successful future.
Thank you, Don. And Sonia, I mentioned earlier that we looked at the trading issue from several angles, from drinking water wells, dust risks, small farms, and found that trading might actually help mitigate some of the challenges that we are, kind of assessing. Also for small communities. What are the concerns or there have been a lot of issues and comments. So I would like to hear about what are the concerns from small communities and the potential impacts to small communities from trading, and how are you dealing with them?
Sure. Well, excuse me. I serve on the advisory or on the committee for the Kauai Subbasin water marketing strategy that Aaron just shared here. When sharing the water marketing information with communities, their biggest concern is, will they have to buy water for their communities? We do not want to see communities needing to buy water from like a water market. A lot of the communities, as I previously mentioned, are already impacted by contamination, and families have to buy water to drink and cook and, not have that contaminated water for those purposes. So they're already spending money on buying water that is not contaminated. One of the things that I think is important and that we've seen with the Kauai Subbasin water marketing program that's being developed is two of the guiding principles, like Aaron mentioned earlier, that were developed. I think two I want to just highlight and point out to. One of the guiding principles is adaptability, so promoting adjustments in practices, rules, and procedures as conditions change. That is going to be very important because this is all new. Like we can't expect to know what we don't know. This is going to be new for everyone. And so starting small, having a pilot market, and then adapting and navigating to changes will be very key to the success. Also, the do no harm. There's a do no harm principle. So it says anticipate and avoid the risks of adverse impacts to water users and uses. So not impacting water resources or water quantity for communities. Again, one of the things we don't want to see is communities having to buy water. Water should be allocated to communities from the get-go, and then this is going to be for profit, right? Like water markets are going to serve a purpose for profit, so that ag can continue, and we want to see ag continue. We want to see the ag industry be sustainable, and that is going to be require a lot of changes and a lot of transitions. But ultimately, we do want to see the ag community be sustainable, and alongside that, have our communities thrive. So I think like just the mindset we have to think about is working together. So and using community and ag, and not community or ag. In general, I think having that approach, I think like we can be successful in many of these approaches that we are looking at for SGMA implementation and for reaching sustainability in the long term.
Thanks, Sonia. That totally makes a lot of sense. And I want to go with Kassy really quickly because we are on time also for the Q&A. So you also, as I mentioned earlier, you also work on special projects manager in the Fresno Irrigation District. So I wanted to ask you generally, because we have talked a lot about collaboration, do you see more collaboration across water agencies and GSAs to enhance trading and new supplies and other issues? Have you seen more recently?
Yeah, I think it's one of the wins of SGMA. I think SGMA has caused uncomfortable dialogue to take place, uncomfortable conversations to take place, and uncomfortable coordination. And maybe not so much uncomfortable, but unfamiliar. Conversations that weren't happening are happening now because of SGMA. And that's true in my role with Fresno Irrigation District. Depending on which meeting I'm in and which hat I'm wearing, it's very convenient to be able to help the communities utilizing the resources that Fresno Irrigation District has. We have some excellent examples of that. So one is the Biola Community Services District. The way we're structured is each agency is going to mitigate for the pumping that's occurring within their boundary. That's part of the North Kings GSA. We can only do that two ways, as we know, that we've talked a lot about today. So these agencies want to do projects, but they don't have a water supply. So because of their involvement with the North Kings GSA and the resources from Fresno Irrigation District, we're able to work with them to create a water supply so they can build a project and then have water to put on into that particular basin in years like this. It's great, it's multi-benefit, and it's things that weren't happening so much before. So I think those types of opportunities will continue to be present, and it's exciting to be able to flip the hat around and be able to facilitate some of those conversations and those meetings and those opportunities. And I think in general, it's been very positive. We do have a lot of disadvantaged communities within our basin, and so working with them to make sure that they are locally meeting their sustainability goals, and then we can branch out from there.
Thanks, Kassy. So let's go now with the audience. We want to hear from you. So please, if anyone has a question for our panelists. Yep.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the panelists for their time. I'm a grower from Merced County. I have actually two questions, one for Kassy, one for Aaron. Kassy, may you share with us what are the largest deficiencies that need correction? And Aaron, what are the 5 principles?
Recite them by memory, Aaron. This is your test. I'll start, though. Give him a little bit of time to search his notes. Just kidding. So I would say there were 12 deficiencies that were identified in our completeness determination from DWR. I think by far the most difficult ones to address will be the domestic well mitigation program, partly because not because we don't have a framework, as Sonia mentioned, but because we have a lot of impact. So figuring out how do we quantify and better define the problem and then be positioned to generate revenue to implement the solution. So that was a big one. And then the other one has to do with interconnected surface water. We have an obligation, and we indicated in our GSP that we submitted back to DWR to address the first round of inadequacy determinations that said we would establish SMC, sustainable management criteria, for that particular undesirable result. And so we have to study and figure out what that interconnectivity is between surface water and groundwater. And that's not an easy thing to do. So we're going to spend the bulk of the next year or so studying that and trying to get better information, better data, so that we can start to establish those sustainable management criteria.
www.tulareid.org. They're on there. I think, Sonia had 2 of them, the do no harm. You have to, the program has to be flexible enough to allow the transferring of water, and it has to be beneficial, meaning you can't be making trades that are not beneficial, right? And I can't remember the other two. Yeah, transparent. Oh, yeah, transparency was a big one. That was the big issue. Should the trades be made, the data be made public? And you would think that agriculture would say, we don't want our guess who was promoting the fact that the trades need to be transparent? It was our ag constituents. Because they said, if you don't show the numbers that are out there, you don't have a market. So maybe the 5th one was bring chocolate. I can't remember. But if they're on our website, and interestingly, we just ingrain those in our decision making, and then our team back checks it with those 5 principles. But all of our meetings and our product are on our website.
Thanks.
And really, when Kassy was talking about interconnected waterways, there's data gaps out there that really hadn't been studied. And it takes time, as Kassy said, to put all this data together, to do the studies. And, we're up at 2025 is right around the corner where we have to update GSPs. So it's a continuous process. So it's not just one and done, your GSP's in, you're accepted. It's a continually updated plan.
There was a silver lining to getting an inadequate. DWR was gracious enough that our GSAs don't have to do a 2025 GSP update. I don't recommend you pursue that strategy, but that's one less thing we don't have to do. But I would like to say, and I don't know if Kassy, you would say it too, I think my GSA probably is upwards of $2 million into that GSP now. And my clock right now has never been, my consultant bills right now, our 2 core teams are meeting weekly, and I'm probably burning about $5,000 to $10,000 a week right now.
Thanks so much. That was really interesting. Yeah, question here. Please, could you state your name?
Okay.
Even I know yours.
Hold just a minute. Yeah. I'm sorry, what were you saying? I'm trying to get...
Could you state your name?
Oh, yeah,
also?
I'm Don Wright with Water Rights. I've got a concern, I'm not sure if it's... Let me hold it, please.
It's okay.
What do you think I'm going to do, steal it?
Yes.
Well, let's try this again here. I've got a concern out there that goes beyond who's holding the mic, and it is that I'm seeing our friends up in Sacramento trying to reinvent SGMA legislatively, We pushed off a lot of bad bills this year with water rights. There's one out there right now, AB 779, that's going to change, put a GSA in the middle of adjudication process that would have been a court. And this might be more for some of for PPIC folks who have a broader scope of the entire state, but it does look like the legislature continually tries to reinvent, segment its own image each session, and it seems like moving that goalpost is going to be very difficult to ever achieve anything. And I could cite a bunch of bills, but I'd like to get your opinions and see if that is something I need to lay awake at night over.
Kassy.
It is very difficult to implement a program when the goalpost is moving and the requirements are moving. So one of the things that we have to remind ourselves is the flexibility piece, and then to really stay on top of it and be engaged. It takes a huge amount of effort to try to combat against the moving of the goalposts. But, you know, SGMA in and of itself, the way it was legislatively written, is challenging enough without having to try to adjust along the way for new requirements. So I don't know. I think it's just going to continue to be a challenge that we're going to have to work through and be aware of and try to educate to the extent possible so that bad bills don't get passed and that we can continue implementing our plan and doing the good work that we've started.
I just wanted to add, it is difficult, Dawn, and you know, I've talked about it a lot. We've even been, you know, up trying to resolve some of these issues. There were some, I would say a majority of them weren't going to help. There were some that were going to help, and I think those that were going to help, those legislators spent the time with the constituents to understand what the issues were. And on the other side of the fence, I don't know if there was enough time spent to understand what they were trying to do and what they were trying to solve. And then was there a genuine, you know, willingness to listen and make adjustments? But I agree with you. I think this session there was many more bad bills than there were good bills. And for those of us, I don't know anybody on this stage that has a staff big enough to deal with all of that. So many of us are up at night drafting comment letters, opposition letters, support letters, because we can't do it during the daytime. So it is problematic. If I had one request of Sacramento, is just, could you just let us get going? Like, I'm spending 75% of my time trying, you know, on certain things, and I need to spend 75% of my time on implementation, right? So let us get started and then start evaluating how we're doing. Are groundwater levels going up? Are disadvantaged community wells being mitigated and addressed or not going dry? But groundwater doesn't move in fast enough to be what we're doing right now. We got to take the time and let it mellow out and see how your decisions and the reactions. It's the same thing we tell canal operators. Don't go make a change in the canal and then take a reading and then make a change. You'll be there all day long. You make a change, you wait you're learning that in canals, right, Don? Make a change, wait a couple of hours, go back and take a reading. In groundwater, you make a change, you wait a year or two, and you go and revise. But right now, we're in this vicious cycle of change, and we're not seeing we have to draw those correlations.
Thanks so much. More questions?
We've got a question from Chris Moreno, who's an environmental scientist with the Nevada Department of Agriculture. And he asks, how is land subsidence taken into consideration for groundwater recharge? What studies or investigations into the soils and underlying aquifers are looking at the capacity for groundwater levels?
Aaron?
Yeah, I'm the lucky one that gets that one too. We are the poster child for SGMA because we have all the undesirable results except seawater intrusion for now. We haven't found that yet, but we might find it. So subsidence is a huge issue, and the first data gap or the first thing you need to do is understand what's subsiding and at what rate and what pumping is correlated with that. So we're at that stage right now. We invested and we're one of the early adopters of SkyTem data to see down deep enough to see what is collapsing, where are our clay layers that are collapsing, and where is our pumping. So we aren't at the stage where we have it fully understood, but we're partnering with Stanford University and some very brilliant people in subsidence, and we're all trying to figure it out. But it is being incorporated into our groundwater sustainability plan and minimum thresholds. And the minimum threshold for groundwater levels is integrated into the subsidence level when you get into a confined aquifer. So you can't set the confined aquifer level too low because it'll trigger your minimum threshold in subsidence. So they're interplayed together.
Yep, we've actually banned wells below the Corcoran clay, which is where you use, if you extract from below in your confined aquifer, you're going to get subsidence by collapsing that clay layer. So we're just working with the unconfined, which is typically in our region anywhere from approximately 500 to 400 feet, and we're managing the unconfined aquifer, and we're prohibiting wells below into the confined aquifer where you will get subsidence. So we're approving or disapproving every well that is put within our GSA. We're putting every well is probably 95% of our wells are now registered, and we're moving toward telemetric meters on wells through grants we've received.
Thanks, Don. So we have 1 minute left, so let's go to a last quick question.
Sorry, Sharon Bennis, Fresno State. Aaron mentioned, that if you really want to do groundwater recharge, you have to have more storage, and it's not going to be big statewide dams. I'm wondering to what extent you think, it'll take time, but maybe river floodplains, wetlands, perennial grasslands might help with storing water. And, when you think about water quality protection, maybe some of those perennial grasses can take out some of the nitrogen and other nutrients. If they're non-vegetated basins or just reservoirs, you don't have that same capacity to do that. And who knows, maybe some of those grasses can be dairy feed. So I'm sure it's probably been thought of, but any comments on that?
That's kind of a downstream program of what I was talking about. We're looking at upstream in the foothills, and we do have reservoirs that are up there. They just weren't designed to be big enough. We don't have enough storage for these big flood years. So it's creating a little bit of extra storage downstream of the larger storage, or even in some cases a little bit of storage upstream of a larger reservoir to kind of slow it down so that you can flow it into those programs that you're talking about, which I think we're looking at along our riverbeds. The only thing that we're finding, though, is that as you get along your riverbeds, you can float it out there, but the actual aquifer or storage or availability of space is fairly limited. So you're gonna, and it's fine because in a storm event, you're not meaning to, you just flow it out there, and actually what happens is it comes right back into the stream. So it reduces your losses, and you're pushing and pulling out of that. So it's all incorporated into a kind of a holistic system.
So I know you're wrapping up. So in our GSA, we've done such a good job of overpumping over the years. We can actually store 2 million acre feet of water within our GSA underground, which is like 2 Pine Flat dams. So there's a lot of potential out there. We'd like to see, offsite storage as well above ground, but we know that the potential for underground storage is immense in California.
Thanks so much. Please help me giving them a round of applause. I think it was great. And now we have 15-minute break, I think. At 11, we'll start with the second panel with Katie Peterson. Thanks so much.